So, thank you for joining me today, Al. I'm very excited to talk to you a little bit about strategy. Can we start off with the question of vision and strategy? How are they different? Which one's more important? Which one comes first? Can you talk a little bit about the vision and the strategy process?
Sure. Yeah, thanks for the invite. First of all, I think this will be fun to kind of have some dialogue on this topic. So I appreciate the opportunity to kind of speak to it. Um, I think from a CEO president level in running an organization, I would say vision is more important than strategy. And that may seem counterintuitive to some, but my belief is that if you're listening to your customer in the industry that you serve and you can see trends out in front of your business, vision's important from that perspective. Strategy and execution certainly is a necessity within the business, but I would offer that you can't establish a strategy without the vision. And the strategy is more established by a COO, a CMO, CRO, that type of individual. Not that the president CEO isn't looking to, um, help set those strategies, if you will, but the strategy setting and the accountability side of it really should be the buy-in of the executive team, may C-suites, if you will.
Hmm.
Um, for me in particular, I spend a lot of time on the vision where I get a lot of my um, help, frankly, is being very tied to the customer and having a ear to where they're going. In particular, questions like what makes you successful in the industry you serve, right? Through the products that I might be supplying. So if you can make those types of correlations, they're critical to how you set your vision.
So,
Um,
how do you go about setting a vision? What are the steps to creating a vision that can really drive a company forward?
Yeah, there's some tools you can use. There's certainly the Pastel, which is the PESTL,
Yeah.
which most are very familiar with. I think there's segments within that um, you can pull from, whether it's political or economical or what have you, if it's technology, whatever's driving the industry in particular for your organization. Um, you pull elements from that.
Hmm.
I think it's important to use some form of a framework that is very specific to the industry that you're serving. And I put it that way more so than to the business that you're operating. Because I think we as leaders sometimes can have blinders on with what our core capabilities are, and then we try to set a vision to those core capabilities. Um, Not that that's a wrong way of doing it. It's just that it might be a short goal, if you will.
Hmm.
Um, Versus if you look at where your industry is going and you're more open in your thinking, I think you can set a stronger vision that has a broader growth path, if you will, for the organization.
Yeah, I really agree with that. A vision really needs to start external first and then come to internal. If you start internal, you really just think about yourself and what you can do, and you don't get that same breadth of ideas.
Yeah, and I think that is a good way of probably framing up the difference between strategy and vision. When you get the strategy that's far more internally focused, well, great. Now, how are we going to execute to it? If we don't have the assets or capital to execute to that vision, then the strategy is going to mean capital investment and probably a little bit of a business transformation, if you will. But that's when you start to get not I didn't want to make that sound like that was negative, but that's more operational
Yeah.
in my thinking than it is visionary.
So, if you want to form a vision to drive a company forward, what are the roles that your president, CEO, GM versus your executive team versus your board of directors, if they exist, versus your ownership? How did all these three entities work together? Can you talk me through the process a little bit?
Yeah, it's a that's a very good way of framing it up. There are you taking in insights and or information from any one of those areas, whether it's a board of directors, ownership team, through to the C-suite. Um, you may have a innovations group that you're working with within your organization as well, or you're looking at industry associations, if you will. Uh, but certainly listening to a board of directors, bouncing ideas off of them is vital to that vision setting, for two reasons, which are obvious. One is they should have insights if they're on your board about the business and the industry that you serve, and give you some insights that uh, may cause you to think differently on your vision. And frankly, you're going to need their buy-in in order to get capital investment if you need it. Um, and it's you know, I'm a strong believer that when you're setting vision, you want to take as many uh, elements of information from different categories as possible,
Hmm.
in order to make sure that you're thinking through that vision appropriately. And because the point of failure when you set that vision is getting it to implement, right? And if you don't have clear vision and you can't uh, communicate the purpose and the cause to that vision and direction for the organization, it's very difficult. I mean, I don't know how you lead through that, right? I mean, you need to have the organization follow, and so making sure that you're taking as much information to your question from each one of those areas or categories is critical to making sure you're setting the vision appropriately.
How do you ensure that the vision is realistic?
You know, I think you have to really align, you know, where your current state is and what you can perform uh, with where you think that future is going to be with the vision. And I think there's rails that you kind of look at, say, you know, from an investment to an ROI. Certainly, you're going to get a lot of insight from your board of directors or your ownership to keep you inside those rails, if you will. Um, and I think that's how you have to balance that vision. And you know, it's you know, we can go down all sorts of paths with, you know, there's certainly a lot of speakers and professionals out there that, you know, kind of speak the vision setting. And, but I think, you know, as a CEO and a president, um, you have to also be careful with putting too many parameters on yourself when you're looking at that vision, or you may lack the emotional flexibility, if you will, that's necessary to transition or transform your business if you need to. I mean, there's a component of that that you can study on, you know, how Apple, you know, has the emotional flexibility component to it that is all the way back from Steve Jobs, that pivoted the company with tremendous risk. Yeah, but you know, that's a whole different topic.
Um, so Al, you've talked about the role that emotional flexibility plays in setting a vision. Can you talk a little bit about what you mean and how it plays in?
Sure. Where I'm going with that is, you know, the emotional flexibility component of it is, can you, well, I guess there's probably two components. I should frame that up a little bit better. There's intellectual flexibility, there's emotional flexibility. Um, and those two components are important when you're setting that vision, because it allows you to um, uh, ch uh, challenge your thinking, allowing you to get outside those rails of a business, allows you to take risk. And I think that's why those two are very important as you're looking at your vision.
So how does this emotional flexibility and willingness to take a risk, how does it play in with the primary fiduciary responsibility of the leader to ensure that the company is risk tolerant and it is an ongoing entity? How do you balance those two needs?
It's a great question, because you can also look, you know, if you look to have too much flexibility, you could be viewed as a gunslinger, right? And placing too much risk on the organization. But you asked a very good question prior, which was, you know, how do you utilize different points of within an organization with a board of directors, ownership, C-suite, to make sure that you're staying within certain parameters, or you're using them to set your vision. Again, I think that's all part of the program that you're looking at. I mean, there's a lot of different steps that you're going to go through when you're setting a vision. Um, the emotional flexibility or emotional intelligence or the flexibility within all of that is really um, is more to it's another way of saying, how risk tolerant you are, how willing are you to take risk. But then you use the other factors of talking to your board of directors ownerships to look at to make sure that you're staying within your risk tolerance for the organization is in alignment with what you can actually succeed at. If you're not setting a, you're not serving one industry and looking to place a rocket on a moon if that's not within your capabilities, right?
Yeah, it's certainly a challenge. So we've talked a lot about the idea of a vision, but can we really get down to the nitty gritty? There's so many different formulations out there, and people who want to help you set a vision for your organization. How do you actually go about setting that vision?
Yeah, I think that's a good. Uh, it's a really good way to frame that up, Matthew. 'Cause I think we get oftentimes lost in not that following a process is bad for organization, but I think we spend oftentimes we spend far too much time. It might be 2 to 3 day offsites or something to set the vision for an organization. And quite frankly, as a leader, I don't believe that you do a stop and start on a vision. I think it's good to establish a vision, but that's it. Visions, much like strategy, are always evolving. It's like trying to set a budget, a budget for the entire year. I don't know about your experience in running a business, but I don't know that I've ever hit a budget precisely as I thought the first day
Sure.
as I started the year, right?
Depends
And
a lot on
so
how much money you spend and how much money you make.
precisely. So I think vision's much the same to some extent. You know, so I offer that, in my experience, taking far more of a pragmatic approach to set that vision is important. And again, I would go back to what is your customer telling you, and where are they going within the industry that you're serving, and how are they getting there? And if you're upstream far enough with your customer and you understand how your product and services are helping them achieve the success within their industry, that alone starts to set 70 to 80% of your vision of where you need to go as an organization. The missing component um, is innovation, and
Hmm.
that is offering products that your customers aren't thinking about. Um, but again, that's far more of a pragmatic approach. Are you listening to your sales force on a regular basis uh, on where the customer, what they're asking for? And if you're intentional about that, your vision becomes far more clear as you run the organization. Again, I think there's, the short term. Um, well, I don't want to say short term vision because that sounds more like execution. Um, to your customer needs, but those daily feedback loops that you're getting from your sales force, your CMO, your CRO, whomever that might be, you need to have that constant feedback loop on where the direction of your customer is going, and then you keep aligning your business. Which at some point that's a good from a CEO president level. That is a good way of measuring the success of the vision that you set, and you need to be adjusting it.
So if we were to break it down to a simple recipe, it would be half a cup of, upstream customer insight, a quarter cup of innovation, and then I'll throw in a quarter cup of what ownership wants. Ultimately, are they trying to build a growth business? Are they trying to build a EBITDA churning machine? What are they trying to build? So those would be the three things that I'm hearing from you, that with the addition of the ownership desire, that we'd put in our glass and shake up. Is that fair?
Yeah, I know. I think that's a fair way of summarizing that. Yeah, I think that's a good recipe. Again, I think it speaks to um, too often we just get too tied up in we have to have 25 elements covered to set our vision, and The old Dilbert cartoon comes into play quite often about getting kind of tied all up
Sure.
into the minutia and just not getting anything accomplished. So I think if you use that simple recipe to getting your vision set, and quite frankly, you can frame that up in a way, in a form that your organization can buy into. Again, that gets to the part that we've already covered. I think the execution and the strategy component of it is an absolute necessity of the company. And so how you frame that vision up has to be clear and concise, have a cause behind it that people can buy into, and you should have success.
So would you be a fan of, printing out the vision and putting it on your conference rooms?
Yeah, I would be. I think if you can't stand behind it, you're not willing to promote it. I don't think you've done your job. Um, I think I had the good fortune many years ago of speaking with Cantalupo, who was the CEO, now passed, but he was the CEO of McDonald's that ran it through a turnaround. It ran it through a turnaround in the late '80s, early '90s. Um, and he had a simple vision, and his vision was plan to win. And Matthew, in every cubicle of the corporate office had planned to win, and the individuals planned to win. And so when he would walk through the facility, he would just walk up to individuals and say, "Oh, I want to see your plan to win." And it created this environment that turned McDonald's from its stock price was crashed at that point. People didn't have confidence in the food. It just was not in a good place, in a good state. They lost sight of their franchisees owners. They were all adrift and, taking their, and so he pulled all that together with a simple phrase: plan to win. Um, and it was a big turnaround.
Yeah, I got to say, when I think about a vision, I think about something a little bit more concrete than that, a kind of a statement as to where we're going or what the future looks like. I think about vision kind of outlining the future that you're going to create. So I'm a little bit curious. Plan to win just seems so loose.
Well, it was all framed around they were losing in the marketplace, and they became a corporation and a company of people just showing up to work.
Yeah.
And so, in order for him to move it and launch it into a new direction and transform the business, you need to get people to buy into the fact that they need to win. We got to get back to being the top franchise owner and top food, fast food restaurant in the industry. And how do you plan to win to do that? And so that's what his whole philosophy was, and his vision for the organization.
So there's a clear context for the team.
Yeah.
So Al, you've talked a lot about the importance of, flexibility when you're setting a vision. Can you talk a little bit about what you mean by that, what elements of flexibility and how they play in?
Yeah. Fair. Um, Probably the most significant components of the flexibility when you're looking at your vision is having, they refer to it as existential flexibility. And I think that's a very necessary component, because if you don't have the flexibility to look at things that are existential outside of your business today, that may challenge you, uh, you're doing yourself an injustice, and you're doing your company an injustice, frankly, more importantly. When you're looking at your vision, you've got to be open to challenging your status quo. And you may be on a direction set that um, we could recite many companies, right, Matthew, that stayed to their course, and this is who we are. And you can name many companies that aren't they're no longer.
Yeah.
Um, and I think that existential flexibility is important as you're looking at your vision, because you may look at it and say, well, our customer's moving in this direction. Yeah, well, I'm pretty certain that the physical checks aspect of our world is going to stay, or whatever you want to pick, because that's core to what you do today. Um, I think that's a dangerous position, and so having that flexibility or the ability to challenge yourself in your thinking of where you are, who you are today is important.
Are there any other elements of flexibility that you really think are important as you think about setting a vision?
Yeah, I do. I would offer that the whole emotional intelligence component and the flexibility around that is also a major element because you will be challenged in that vision, and how you have the fortitude to stick with it, and having the emotional intelligence to influence and collaborate with individuals to get their buy-in
Hmm.
on that vision is real key. So there's other components to that as well, for sure.
Thank you.